Venezuela's top prosecutor calls for an investigation into the opposition's corruption scheme. Yet another former FARC combatant murdered in Colombia's Cauca department on Monday. And U.S. President Donald Trump launches his 2020 re-election campaign amid protest. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Former FARC combatant Anderson Perez Osorio was murdered in Colombia's Cauca department on Monday. The FARC party has issued a statement condemning the lack of action by the government of Iván Duque in upholding the peace accords. Osorio served as a social communicator and community leader in northern Cauca. Since the signing of the agreements in 2016, former FARC members have been faced with violence by right-wing paramilitaries throughout Colombia. Including Osorio, 136 ex-combatants have been killed despite having laid down their arms in search of peace. And that same statement by the party called for an emergency meeting on Friday at 8 a.m. at the FARC's own headquarters in Bogotá to, quote, determine the response to provocation from the enemies of peace. Our correspondent, Tatiana Portela, has more.
President
Ivan Duque has wrongly said that during his government, the assassination of social leaders have reduced. But just yesterday, 2 former guerrillas were killed. These former guerrillas were part of the peace deal. Anderson Perez Osorio, who was a journalist and was part of the FARC communications team, was in a pool when he was shot by gunmen. And Daniel Esterria was shot in the Nariño department after leaving a meeting with the UN. It is important to highlight that this situation has become very common in Colombia. The FARC party has announced that these killings are affecting the peace deal. Not to mention that during his tour in Europe, President Ivan Duque has reiterated his commitment to the implementation of the peace deal and to stopping the killings of social leaders. But the reality in the country is different. I also have to add that on Tuesday afternoon, Ivan Duque will attend a forum on climate change and an end to deforestation. A situation that is also not the reality of Colombians, since in various territories, indigenous peoples are forced to leave their territories due to the deforestation of their lands. That is why various social leaders and human rights defenders have said that President Ivan Duque is showing 2 faces, one on an international level, where he says he has a compromise with the peace deal, and 2, the reality that takes place here in Colombia.
We thank Tatiana for that report. The corruption scheme led by opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó will be investigated by Venezuela's public ministry. The announcement by Venezuela's top prosecutor, Tarek William Saab, comes a day after the country's communications minister, Jorge Rodriguez, revealed the details of the misuse of aid funds. The prosecutor also noted that stolen funds have been used for individual personal expenses, alcohol consumption, recruitment of prostitutes, and presumably to fund destabilizing acts against the country. He said that since funds were directed from Venezuela, it is up to his office to investigate the origin of these funds and their use.
The plot in which Venezuelan citizens, led by the usurper Guaidó, appropriated funds, which were initially meant for assisting Venezuelans who were in the city of Cúcuta, by people named as follows: Rosana Edith Barrera Castillo and Kevin Javier Rojas. These 2 suspects are the material authors of the acts, but the mastermind is Guaidó. These people falsify receipts to show that they paid for hotels where Venezuelans were staying, of which, according to those hotels, were paid for, according to this claim, by the UN Refugee Agency. Additionally, they inflated the number of supposed Venezuelan military personnel defectors who are in Cúcuta in order to justify the squandering of that money.
Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro spoke out on the newly surfaced allegations. He says these allegations of corruption surrounding the opposition come as no surprise.
While we are fighting and governing every day, taking care of all the issues our people currently face, they were doing the same old things they always do. Their corruption is nothing new. The only thing that is new is the obscenity of how they stole all the money and how they share it among themselves. They laugh in the face of the US government and the so-called humanitarian aid. They stole everything and then spend it like crazy. Evidence of all of this has already come out.
The 14th Africa Commemoration meeting has begun in Venezuela. Activities include cinema and showcases of typical food. The event was inaugurated by the Minister of Culture along with the 8 African delegations. More in this report.
A week dedicated to the celebration of the culture, gastronomy, and liberatory struggles of the African continent has begun in Venezuela. Events unveil the roots which unite the peoples of Africa and Latin America.
We recognized the motherland as being Spain. We had a Eurocentric vision of ourselves. Commander Chavez, at the forefront of the Bolivarian Revolution, without denying that route, got us to look up to Africa with admiration, and we now call it mother, with pride, and we feel like brother people to the children of Africa.
Algeria, Angola, Democratic Arab Republic, Sahrawi, Nigeria, Sudan, Egypt, South Africa, Equatorial Guinea will showcase the links between Africa and Latin America.
To us, it's an honor. It's a way to open the doors of Angola to the people of Venezuela, and others can enter and get a taste of the culture without leaving Venezuela. We are representing our culture with gastronomy, touristic spots, and with the development that Angola has seen since the end of the war.
We are proud to be here to demonstrate our closeness, our solidarity with this great Venezuelan nation. And this week, there will be more strengthening of relations between Africa and Venezuela.
They also are united by the liberatory struggles against slavery and the colonialism of the First World Powers.
We see it today in the attempts of the U.S. administration to reactivate the Monroe Doctrine in Latin America. The attempts to lead our people towards a worse confrontation by imposing their vision of international relations.
The South-South relation makes the people more independent, gives more opportunities to be independent. It gives us the ability to be independent regarding the exploitative colonial North, which continues to colonize our countries.
The relations continue strengthening in recent years amid the attacks against the Bolivarian Project, a period in which Venezuela has encountered the support of the African nations.
Over 180 Venezuelan migrants will be repatriated this week from Peru as part of the Bolivarian government's return to the homeland plan. 2 flights are set for Tuesday and Wednesday, carrying 90 passengers each. This group will be part of almost 3,000 Venezuelan migrants who have returned to their country from Peru. This government program began in September of last year, under which 14,250 people have returned to Venezuela.
There were no jobs, so we can't stay here. Salaries are not enough to cover expenses. Thank God we have this opportunity to return, although it will be difficult. I'm going to keep my hopes up that everything is going to get better. There's nothing like my home and my family.
Nicaragua's government has announced that it has complied with the amnesty law by releasing all prisoners involved with right-wing U.S.-backed violence during the failed coup that shook the country in 2018. This is the culminating result of negotiation talks between Daniel Ortega's administration and opposition delegations, which began on March 27th, when the list of prisoners to be released was agreed upon. Nicaragua's National Assembly approved on June 8th the law, which provides one-off amnesty to those who committed crimes during the right-wing protests last year. The Sandinista government has established 2,000 reconciliation commissions around the country in a fresh bid to bring peace. The commissions will come in the form of meetings held around the country, which will push for peace and understanding and justice for victims of the right-wing violence. Coming up after the break, U.S. President Donald Trump launches his 2020 re-election campaign amid protests. Stay with us. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump has formally launched his 2020 re-election campaign in Orlando, Florida, amid growing unpopularity in his home state. Taken to social media, Trump said, "We are building large movie screens outside to take care of everybody. Over 100,000 requests. Our country is doing great, far beyond what the haters and losers thought possible." But it's a different story back home in New York, where most people spoke against his re-election. Florida is a critical swing state, as in 2016. This is where Trump beat Hillary Clinton by nearly 100,000 votes, sending him on his way to the White House.
I mean, I think he shouldn't be president. He's done enough damage to his country, and I believe we all know he's a racist. So I'm not for him. I mean, I'll vote for anybody else, but not him.
I mean, I was shocked that he got it the first time, so I don't know, I have little belief in the American people, but maybe, hopefully, we'll all come together and realize that he's an imbecile. So I hope it doesn't happen again. Dear God. God.
Meanwhile, as Trump launched his re-election campaign in Florida, protesters and the giant baby blimp positioned themselves just a few blocks from the rally. Protesters held placards reading "Impeach Trump" and "Dump the Trump" took to the streets. One woman held a sign which read, "I'm an immigrant. Immigrants make America great." A number of Central American asylum seekers have been returned to the border city of Ciudad Juarez in Mexico after being separated from their families. Under a program called Remain in Mexico, asylum seekers are forced to await the outcome of their U.S. asylum claims outside the U.S. The Trump administration has been preparing for the immediate expansion of the controversial practice along the entire southern border. According to officials, close to 12,000 people have been returned to Mexico since the program started in January.
How else should I feel? I wanted to be with my family and we were returned. They said that we had a certain amount of time for the asylum process. We have a certain amount of time. We had hoped to wait over in the US because we wanted to be with our families, and we were brought here.
Heads of government of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States have wrapped up their two-day meeting in Antigua and Barbuda. During the summit, 2 motions on climate change and de-risking were unanimously adopted in Antigua's parliament. The new OECS chairman, Prime Minister Dr. Gaston Brown, turned his attention to the issue of regional transportation, saying he's determined to keep light in the Caribbean skies.
Insofar as LIAT is concerned, we're having discussions with other potential participants. In fact, I believe that immediately after this press conference, we'll be speaking to our dear friend, the Premier of the BVI, and we have others who we're having discussions with. As you know, Dominica is already a shareholder, and what we're trying to do here is to broaden the participation in LIAT so that LIAT would function as a truly regional institution, not to be dominated by any one country. In fact, you know, we're in a situation now in which we have offered to take over, if not all, a significant majority of the debts of Barbados. And it's not a share grab on the part of Antigua and Barbuda.
Bahamas' former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham has expressed his support for the legalization of medical marijuana. Ingraham suggests that consideration is given to those people who possess small quantities for recreational use. This, as too many young Bahamians are imprisoned for possessing small quantities of cannabis. A commission set up to examine the public views of marijuana will make recommendations to the government, which will subsequently be tabled and discussed in Parliament. The Bahamas could see a financial benefit of around $5 million from the legalization of the substance and regulation of its sale. The Caribbean Court of Justice, or the CCJ, has ruled that last December's no-confidence motion was validly passed in Guyana with a majority of 33 votes. The government had argued that 34 votes were needed to pass the motion. CCJ President Justice Adrian Saunders says Guyana's constitution clearly states that the government must resign when it loses to a no-confidence motion. Justice Saunders adds that nothing stopped then-government MP Sharan Das Persad from voting against a measure, but he could still be recalled and the vote would still be valid.
Both findings of the Court of Appeal were appealed to this court. It was argued on behalf of the Attorney General, Mr. Reid, and Mr. Joseph Hammond, all lumped together and referred to as the respondents, that Article 106.6 did not apply to motions of no confidence. They highlighted the fact that the article in the Constitution used the phrase, and I quote, on a vote of confidence, unquote. And they submitted that there was a fundamental difference between a motion of confidence and a motion of no confidence. In particular, it was argued that only a member of the government could move motions of confidence, and that the article, that's Article 106, that article's requirement for the government to resign and for elections to be held did not apply to motions of no confidence. The court rejected these submissions. The court held that Article 106 gave effect to the fundamental principle of responsible or accountable government, a principle that required the government to resign when it no longer enjoyed the confidence of Parliament. The court held that since the Assembly comprised an odd number of persons, that is 65, when all the members of the Assembly are present and vote, all that is necessary is to determine whether the motion has garnered, quote, a majority of all the elected members, unquote. Such a majority in the court's view was clearly at least 33 votes.
Indigenous leaders across Peru have traveled to Lima to demand that the government stop being an accomplice to illegal deforestation that is destroying the Amazon forest and leaving their people vulnerable.
These are Jorge Rios' relatives, one of the 4 indigenous defenders of Soweto who was murdered in 2014 by the mafia responsible for wood trafficking. They say up until now they have not received justice while they are still being threatened.
The threats continue, and we live in fear of what can happen to our families, our authorities, or other leaders that are fighting, and it's not fair. The government needs to arrest the situation.
Native leaders from Peru's Amazon also went to Lima to deliver a petition to President Martin Vizcarra with over 7,000 signatures from persons in Peru and across the world. The petition is seeking to put an end to deforestation, but the president did not engage with them.
Previous governments and current regimes continue to support large transnational companies that take part in illegal work. This includes illegal logging, hydrocarbon activities, and roadworks.
Satellites which are monitoring Peru's forests have revealed that in the last 15 years, the South American country has lost roughly 2 million hectares of forest. Indigenous people are the most affected.
There
are no wild fauna. There are no fish in the lakes and streams. This points to a growing food shortage, as 80% of indigenous people living in the Amazon are malnourished.
Artists and countries around the world are joining the campaign against deforestation and against the persecution of indigenous leaders.
Many musicians have joined the cause and have committed to not buying any instrument unless the supplier can guarantee the legal and sustainable origin of the good. We have also held these discussions with companies and governments.
The deforestation of the Amazon has led to the emission of 60 million metric tons of carbon in the last 5 years, increasing the planet's temperature and causing natural disasters like rains and intense droughts.
Coming up after the break, we bring you up to date on the Women's World Cup and the Cricket World Cup. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now let's go to sports around the world.
South Africa is optimistic ahead of its group phase game against New Zealand in the Cricket World Cup. South Africa's wicket-keeper and batsman Quinton de Kock described Wednesday's game as a knockout match in which they will have to win. His team still has a chance of reaching the last 4, but they will need to win their remaining games against Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Australia. And in France, where the Women's Soccer World Cup is taking place, Australia has beaten Jamaica 4-1. While 6-time World Player of the Year, Marta scored a record 17th World Cup Finals goal to clinch Brazil's place in the last 16 with a 1-0 win over Italy, who topped Group C on goal difference.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telestorenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.